I'm Jason Little, and this is 10 minutes off the top of my head. I want to talk to you about who they are. The infamous they, them. They get quoted more than anybody else. Do you know what I'm talking about? You're having a conversation with somebody and you quote some fantastic statistic or you quote some crazy fact and they say, well, where'd you get that from? Well, that's what they say. That's what they told me. That's what they. Who are they? Well, in order to understand who they are, we have to go back a little bit further, a little bit more, a lot more back. We have to go way, way back. We have to get an understanding about the history of the world. And so we need to study this, look at this, think about this. And I encourage you to do some study on your own because number one, I'm not always right. Number two, sometimes I get things a little bit mixed up. I think it's this way and it's that way, and so do you. I admit it. I promise you, I know that I don't know everything. I know for a fact that I do not know everything, but I'm trying. I'm trying real hard to find it all out. But they begin way back when, not 1,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago, further back than that. So we need to go way back to the time when Adam and Eve were created by God. And we need to set this straight as well. And I should have done this a long time ago. I believe what the Bible says. You may not believe what the Bible says, or you may try to switch it up or change it or make it meld with what the world's saying. But I believe what the Bible says literally. And I believe that we should take the Bible literally where the Bible is speaking literally. Is there allegory in the Bible? Sure, there is. But is it all allegory? Absolutely not. So when we read the book of Genesis, in the beginning, it says that God created the heaven and the earth, right? And so we understand that before that time is the unimaginable past. It's something that you can rack your brain about, and you're never going to fully understand it because God existed before he created the heaven and the earth. God existed before. God has always existed. Always. In the eternity past, there's never been a time that God didn't exist. Now, God created time, and he created time on the first day when he said, let there be light. And then he said the evening and the morning were the first day. That's when time was created. And time is for human beings to measure. It's for us to measure our existence and the existence of our earth. So I believe the literal creation as it's presented to us in the book of Genesis, that God created the heavens and the heaven and the earth, the heavens and the earth, however you want to say it. I'm not going to argue about the heavens or the heaven. God created the heavens and the earth. Okay. And then he said, let there be light, and there was light, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And then we go through this iteration. He divided the darkness from the light. The land appeared. He created the sun and the moon, two lights to rule, the sun to rule the day, the moon to rule the night. Notice the Bible says two lights, by the way. It doesn't say one to reflect off the other. You can think whatever you want, but understand your cognitive dissonance may be kicking in. And speaking of that, did you know that moonlight, when you measured the temperature in moonlight and in shade, and you can look this up on YouTube, there's all kinds of videos. When you measure the moonlight in the shade, or when you measure the shade at night and you measure in the moonlight is cooler than it is in the shade. How's that possible if it's reflecting the sun's light? Ooh, you're crazy, Jason. You're nuts. That's ridiculous. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're a fool. You're suffering from cognitive dissonance. My God, inspiring Moses, told me that he made two lights, not one light, but two lights. Two. One to rule the day, one to rule the night. And he says that he made the stars also. And the stars get such an insignificant little, and he made the stars also. And he made them for what? For time, for days, for seasons, for months, for years. He made those things for us to tell time. And lo and behold, we use them to do just that, to tell time. And so we have to understand that and we're getting to where they came from. Okay, I promise you we're going to get there. So we have to understand that the Bible literally tells us that he made the plants, or he made the plants, and then he made the sun, the moon, and the stars. So he made the plants on day 4 or day 3, the sun, the moon, the stars on day 4. On day 5 he makes the animals, and on day 6 he makes man. On day 7 he rests. Okay, so at this point in time, there is no them. There's no they. They didn't exist. They weren't around yet. But shortly thereafter, they came into being. And it began when the head of them, the head of they, came to Eve and said, "Hey, did God tell you couldn't eat? Did he tell you? He told you not to eat off of this tree, didn't he? Is that what he said? Why would he say that? Oh, God knows that you're not going to die. You'll become gods, just like him." And so the serpent convinces Eve. She takes the fruit and she eats it, and they were born. And they come from their father, the devil, who's a liar and the father of lies. And the most prominent of them was born shortly thereafter. His name is given to us as Cain. And then Cain murders his brother Abel. And when we look at this significant moment in history, we have to understand something very clear. In fact, let's go back up just a little bit. Adam and Eve, they eat the fruit, the forbidden fruit. They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. Prior to this, Adam and Eve were innocent. They had no knowledge of good or evil. They didn't know the difference. There was no difference. There was no evil. It was only good. Okay, so they eat the fruit. Now they know evil. And they notice that they're naked, that they don't have any clothes on. And they're ashamed. And so what do? They go and they get fig leaves to cover themselves, to cover. Isn't it interesting? To cover certain parts of their body. Certainly they did not make long robes for themselves. They didn't wear burqas, but they covered those parts that they understood were exposing themselves. So they cover those parts up. And then God comes along and God says, "Hey, what have you guys been doing? Why are you covered? Why you got clothes on? What's going on?" And of course, God already knew. And so God kills. Think about this. He kills some animals and clothes them with the skin of the animals. It's the first sacrifice. So God kills them and he clothes them with the sheep skins. So then you fast forward to Cain and Abel. Cain is working very hard to raise crops by the sweat of his brow. And God said this, he cursed Adam with this, he cursed mankind with this. By the sweat of your brow, you're going to eat, and you'll return to the dust because that's where you came from. I'm paraphrasing. Go look it up. Go read it for yourself. So Cain is working and toiling in the fields and grazing this crop. He's weeding the garden. He's getting he's combating the insects that are trying to eat his crops that he's raising. And he's working in the toil of his hands. You can just imagine blistered, bruised, broken. Hey man, I changed a radiator the other day in my car and I've got a nasty, you can't see it, but that's better now. I got a nasty bruise on my arm, cuts all over my hands, just a mess. He's working and toiling and doing his best to work as hard as he can to produce this crop. On the other hand, Abel is a keeper of sheep. He's a goat herder. He's a sheep herder. What is he doing? He's living a life of Riley. If you've ever heard that expression, unless the Mandela effect changed it. He's living the life of Riley, man. He's not doing anything. He's just chilling out in the field with a bunch of sheep running around and eating the grass and getting fat and producing wool, and he's going to make clothes out of that wool without killing the sheep and blah, blah, yada, yada. Bada bing, bada boom, here you go. Comes time to worship God. Abel, who didn't really do anything except watch over these sheep, he didn't help them to grow. He didn't have to feed them. He's not working with his hands. It's not labor like what his brother Cain is doing. It's certainly not to the degree of what Cain is doing. So he brings the best of his flock and offers it to God as a sacrifice, which he did nothing to raise. He just watched them, gathered them together and watched them. Cain, on the other hand, takes the toil of his hands and presents that to God. And God rejects the work of Cain's hands. There is a whole message in that right there. It's not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us. And it started off right there in the book of Genesis. So this is the first step to seeing who they are. Like I said, you got to go way back to the very beginning. And we see that they began when the serpent beguiled Eve, when she followed him instead of following God. That's where they began. And they affected Cain. And Cain is going to beget a lot more of them and a lot more of they. But we'll catch that up on the next video. God bless you. See you then.